Welcome, beautiful spicy ladies. The greatest victory is that which requires no battle. Sun Tzu said it best. What if I told you there's a type of person who doesn't just win, but renders their enemies irrelevant? Silently, skillfully, and with an almost maddening finesse. Enter the Sigma, the lone wolf of the social hierarchy, whose brilliance lies not in loud confrontations, but in their ability to dismantle opposition without lifting a finger. Here's a fact. Studies show that the quietest person in the room is often the one analyzing everyone else, plotting moves 2 steps ahead. Now imagine that person isn't just quiet. They're thriving in the shadows, turning every attempt to bring them down into a strategic advantage. Sigmas don't fight fire with fire. They use water, ice, or sometimes just sit back and let the flames burn out on their own. If revenge is a dish best served cold, Sigmas are Michelin star chefs. Prepare to dive into the genius, unconventional ways these enigmatic powerhouses put their enemies to shame. And they do it so effortlessly you'll almost feel sorry for their rivals, almost. Number 1. Using minimal effort for maximum impact. Sigmas have mastered the art of doing more with less, and this trait is what makes them so formidable. When they act, it's with surgical precision, no wasted energy, no unnecessary drama. Their ability to achieve massive impact with minimal effort leaves their enemies scrambling, trying to figure out how they were outmaneuvered so seamlessly. This isn't about being lazy. It's about being smarter, sharper, and more calculated than anyone else in the room. Sigmas excel at identifying the one move that will set off a domino effect, creating a cascade of results with almost no effort on their part. They don't flood the battlefield with unnecessary attacks. Instead, they focus on the one pressure point that will make everything crumble. It's not just efficiency, it's strategic genius. This approach not only spares them time and energy, but also leaves their enemies in complete disarray, often unsure of what even hit them. This minimal effort, maximum impact philosophy extends to every area of their life. A Sigma doesn't need loud gestures to assert their dominance. Instead, they let their results speak for themselves. When faced with opposition, they don't engage in endless arguments or waste time proving themselves. They deliver one decisive move, a calculated response, a perfectly timed action, and suddenly the conflict is over before it even began. What's even more unnerving is the effortless nature of their success. Enemies often mistake their calmness for pity, only to find themselves outplayed at every turn. It's this ability to conserve energy while creating chaos for their opponent that cements the Sigma's reputation. It's not flashy, it's not loud, it's precise, deliberate, and ruthlessly effective. Their enemies are left exhausted while the Sigma walks away unscathed, leaving a trail of silent victories behind them. Number 2. Turning enemies into unwitting allies. Sigmas have a unique ability to turn the tables on their enemies without direct confrontation. They do this by subtly influencing the people around them, including those who oppose them, and redirecting their efforts to serve their own goals. This isn't about manipulation in a malicious sense. It's about playing a game of strategy, so advanced that the enemy doesn't even realize they've been outmaneuvered. The process starts with observation. Sigmas are masters of studying people, understanding their motivations, weaknesses, and desires. They use this knowledge to plan ideas or subtly guide their enemies in a direction that benefits them. Often, they frame their own goals in a way that appears to align with their opponent's interests. The enemy, believing they are pursuing their own agenda, unwittingly begins to push the Sigma's objectives forward. What makes this approach so brilliant is its invisibility. The enemy feels in control, convinced they're gaining ground, while the Sigma is quietly steering the ship from behind the scenes. This tactic can manifest in workplaces, social circles, or even competitive environments where Sigmas leverage the skills and resources of others to create outcomes that favor them. This ability to transform adversaries into assets doesn't just neutralize the threat, it turns it into a source of strength. It's the ultimate power play, getting an opponent to work against their own interests while bolstering yours. By the time the enemy realizes what's happened, it's often too late. The Sigma has already achieved their goal, leaving the rival frustrated and disoriented, wondering how they became an unwitting pawn in someone else's game. It's subtle, it's brilliant, and it's one of the reasons Sigmas are so difficult to defeat. Number 3. Outlasting through emotional discipline. Emotional discipline is one of the Sigma's greatest strengths, and it's what allows them to outlast their enemies in almost any situation. While others get swept up in the chaos of emotions, anger, fear, frustration, a Sigma remains composed and calculated, planning their next move with unshakable calm. This is not a skill they were born with. It's one they've honed over time, mastering the ability to detach from emotional turbulence and focus solely on outcomes. When tensions rise, Sigmas don't react impulsively. Instead, they pause, analyze, and respond with precision. This unfappable demeanor has a disarming effect on their enemies, who often expect emotional reactions as a sign of weakness or vulnerability. The absence of such a response frustrates and confuses opponents, causing them to second-guess their own strategies. In many cases, the enemy's overreaction to a calm Sigma exposes cracks in their own armor. An outburst of anger, a poorly thought-out decision, or an emotional misstep that the Sigma is quick to exploit. This emotional discipline extends beyond mere self-control. It's a psychological advantage. Sigmas understand that staying calm under pressure shifts the balance of power. Chaos thrives on chaos, and when one party refuses to feed into it, the other often burns out. By remaining steady, Sigmas create an environment where their enemies feel increasingly unstable, as though fighting against a brick wall that refuses to budge. What's most remarkable is how effortless this composure appears. It's not that Sigmas don't feel emotions, they do, but they have trained themselves to channel those emotions into clarity and strategy, using them as tools rather than obstacles. While their enemies unravel in the storm of their own making, Sigmas remain the eye of that storm, untouched and unyielding. This ability to outlast through calm persistence is why they are so often underestimated, yet nearly impossible to defeat. Number 4. Becoming the standard others aspire to beat. Sigmas have an uncanny ability to set a standard so high that they become the benchmark for success, even for their enemies. They don't need to declare themselves superior. Their actions, achievements, and sheer presence speak volumes. By excelling in everything they pursue, whether professionally, intellectually, or socially, they inadvertently create an obsession in those who compete with them. Enemies often find themselves consumed by the need to surpass the Sigma, measuring their worth against someone who operates on an entirely different wavelength. The Sigma, however, is rarely concerned with competition. Their focus is internal. They're constantly striving to outdo their past selves, not someone else. This self-directed drive keeps them ahead of the curve while their enemies waste valuable energy trying to catch up. This dynamic creates a paradox for the Sigma's rivals. The more they focus on defeating the Sigma, the more they neglect their own growth. Instead of developing unique strategies or strengths, they mimic the Sigma's methods, hoping to replicate their success. But a Sigma's approach is deeply personal, built on their individuality and self-reliance, making it nearly impossible to duplicate. This leaves enemies chasing shadows, frustrated by their inability to measure up. Over time, this relentless pursuit often leads to burnout, envy, and insecurity among the Sigma's competitors. Meanwhile, the Sigma remains undisturbed, continuing to raise the bar without even trying to compete. It's not arrogance, it's excellence. By becoming the standard others aspire to beat, the Sigma gains a silent but overwhelming advantage. They remain free to grow, evolve, and thrive while their enemies are trapped in a cycle of comparison and self-doubt. It's a masterclass in winning without ever stepping into the ring. Number 5. Winning the battle of narratives. Sigmas are masters of the unseen battlefield, the battle of perception. While others fight with brute force or flashy plays, Sigmas quietly shape the narrative, ensuring the story that surrounds them works in their favor. This ability to control how events are interpreted is one of their most powerful tools, and it's often the weapon that dismantles their enemies without a single direct confrontation. The brilliance of a Sigma's narrative control lies in its subtlety. They don't argue or over-explain. They highlight inconsistencies or allow the truth to unfold in ways that serve their purpose. Through careful communication and timing, they create a version of events that makes their actions appear logical, justified, or even admirable. Their enemies, on the other hand, often find themselves painted as impulsive, reckless, or self-serving without the Sigma ever explicitly saying so. This strategy doesn't just neutralize opposition, it can erode an enemy's support system. Sigmas craft their narratives so skillfully that even the enemy's closest allies begin to second-guess their loyalty. When the story shifts, people naturally gravitate toward the one who seems more composed, rational, and principled, the Sigma. It's not manipulation. It's an artful presentation of truth that works in their favor. What's most unsettling is how effortless this seems. Sigmas don't need to shout or demand attention. Their narrative control operates quietly, like a current that slowly changes the course of a river. By the time their enemies realize what's happening, the damage is already being done. The Sigma has won, not through brute force, but by making their version of events the dominant reality. Their opponents are left isolated, discredited, and unsure of how they lost control. Number 6, making victory look effortless. One of the most fascinating traits of a Sigma is their ability to make success appear effortless. While others wear their struggles as badges of honor or seek validation for their hard work, Sigmas keep their grind behind the curtain. They don't brag about late nights or endless challenges. They simply deliver results with a calm, composed demeanor that leaves everyone, especially their enemies, wondering how they do it. This aura of effortlessness isn't about denying the work it took to get there. It's about maintaining control over perception. Sigmas understand that showcasing struggle can invite unnecessary scrutiny or worse, provide enemies with ammunition to exploit. By presenting success as natural and seamless, they project an image of superiority that intimidates those who try to compete with them. For their enemies, this can be deeply demoralizing. Struggling rivals often assume that the Sigma must have some inherent advantage, natural talent, luck, or hidden resources that they lack. What they don't see is the Sigma's relentless self-discipline, strategic planning, and quiet sacrifices behind the scenes. This perception gap leads enemies to question their own abilities, creating a cycle of self-doubt that only widens the gap between them and the Sigma. What makes this approach so powerful is the psychological edge it provides. By appearing untouchable, Sigmas force their enemies to overcompensate, often leading to poor decisions or reckless actions. Meanwhile, the Sigma remains calm and composed, further reinforcing the illusion of invincibility. It's not just about winning. It's about winning in a way that makes defeat feel inevitable to anyone watching. For the Sigma, the real victory isn't just in achieving success. It's in creating an unshakable image of dominance that lingers long after the battle is over. Number 7, turning an enemy's strength into their weakness. Sigmas possess a rare ability to dismantle their enemies not by attacking their weaknesses, but by targeting their strengths. They understand that what people take the most pride in is often their greatest blind spot, an area where confidence can easily slip into overconfidence. By flipping an enemy's perceived advantage into a liability, Sigmas deliver a psychological blow that cuts deeper than any physical confrontation. The process starts with observation. Sigmas study their enemies with precision, identifying what they value most about themselves, be it intelligence, charisma, power, or skill. Once they've zeroed in on this strength, they exploit it in subtle but devastating ways. For example, an enemy who prides themselves on being the smartest in the room might be gently led into a situation where their overanalysis causes paralysis, or where their need to showcase their intellect leads to a glaring mistake. This strategy doesn't just undermine the enemy's position. It forces them to question their own identity. If the one thing they've always relied on is suddenly working against them, it creates a spiral of doubt and insecurity. The more they lean on their strength, the more it betrays them, leaving them vulnerable and exposed. What makes this approach so effective is its elegance. Sigmas don't need to engage in petty attacks or direct conflict. They let their enemies unravel themselves by weaponizing their strengths. The Sigma turns what once made them formidable into the very thing that holds them back. The aftermath is often more damaging than any physical defeat. Enemies are left grappling with a sense of failure that feels deeply personal. Meanwhile, the Sigma moves forward unscathed, having turned their rival's greatest asset into a fatal flaw. It's a ruthless yet profoundly strategic move that only enhances the Sigma's mystique. Number 8, building resilience through detached analysis. For Sigmas, every conflict, challenge, or attack is more than just an event. It's a learning opportunity. Unlike most people who react emotionally to opposition, Sigmas detach themselves from the situation and view it through the lens of analysis. Every insult, misstep, or scheme from an enemy is meticulously examined not for vengeance but for growth. This approach transforms even their defeats into stepping stones for future success. Sigmas treat their encounters like data-gathering missions. They study their enemies' moves, tensions, and weaknesses with laser focus. What did their rival try to achieve? Where did they overextend themselves? How could they exploit similar tactics in the future? This level of detached analysis allows them to develop strategies that not only counter their enemies' efforts, but also make the Sigma more adaptable and unshakable. This mindset eliminates the emotional baggage that often comes with conflict. While others are bogged down by frustration, anger, or regret, Sigmas remain calm and focused. To them, setbacks are not failures, they're information. And with each new piece of data, the Sigma becomes sharper, stronger, and more prepared for whatever comes next. Over time, this approach builds a kind of resilience that's rare and nearly impenetrable. Sigmas don't just survive attacks, they thrive because of them. Their enemies, on the other hand, often fail to adapt, relying on the same tactics while the Sigma evolves into an even more formidable force. This habit of detached analysis ensures that every encounter works to the Sigma's advantage in the long run. It's not about immediate wins or losses. It's about creating an upward trajectory that makes the Sigma unstoppable. Their ability to turn opposition into insight is what separates them from the pack and what ensures they always come out stronger than before. Number 9. Outsmarting through obscurity. Sigmas have a unique ability to thrive by mastering the art of obscurity. They don't announce their plans, share their intentions, or display their next moves for all to see. Instead, they move through life with deliberate quietness, avoiding the spotlight and creating an aura of unpredictability. Their enemies, who thrive on trying to read their moves, are left in the dark, always one step behind. By staying off the radar, Sigmas make themselves difficult to track or anticipate. They deliberately avoid falling into predictable patterns, choosing instead to keep their motives and actions hidden behind a veil of mystery. This unpredictability keeps everyone on edge, forcing opponents to constantly second-guess their strategies and make mistakes out of uncertainty. This ability to remain elusive is a form of psychological warfare. When enemies can't predict your next move, they can't plan to counter it. They are forced to react in real time, often miscalculating or overreacting because they're unable to foresee what's coming. The Sigma, meanwhile, remains several steps ahead, using this chaos to their advantage. The beauty of this strategy is that it doesn't require forceful confrontation or flashy displays of power. Sigmas don't need to be the loudest or most visible. In fact, they often thrive by doing the opposite. It's about creating an environment where your enemies can never be sure of your intentions or capabilities. This leaves them vulnerable as their energy is spent on trying to outguess you while you continue to move undetected, pushing toward your goals with a sense of calculated invisibility. In the end, this obscure approach gives the Sigma the upper hand. Their enemies are stuck chasing shadows while the Sigma quietly progresses toward their objectives, leaving confusion and chaos in their wake. It's a strategy that ensures the Sigma is always a few moves ahead. Impossible to predict, impossible to beat. Number 10. Exposing flaws through subtle mimicry. Sigmas have a fascinating way of turning an enemy's behavior against them, and they do it with subtlety and finesse. Rather than confronting their rivals head-on, they often mirror their actions or attitudes just enough to expose their flaws, making the enemy's own behavior seem absurd without saying a word. This tactic isn't about mimicry for mockery's sake. It's about drawing attention to the contradictions in their opponent's approach, leaving them intellectually humiliated without ever having to directly attack. By mirroring their enemies, Sigmas highlight inconsistencies or weaknesses in behavior, often creating an uncomfortable self-awareness for the opponent. For instance, if an enemy prides themselves on being overly aggressive or domineering, a Sigma might adopt a similar approach, but do so in a more refined or exaggerated manner, showing just how unnecessary or counterproductive the behavior is. The enemy sees their own traits reflected back at them, but in a way that makes them look ridiculous, as the Sigma's version is somehow more transparent, more over the top, or more awkward. What's powerful about this approach is the psychological effect it has on the enemy. It's not just about exposing a flaw. It's about forcing the opponent to recognize that flaw in themselves in front of others, without ever having to be directly called out. The humiliation isn't loud or obvious. It's quiet, intellectual, and deeply personal. The enemy starts to question their own methods and identity, but by then, it's too late. The Sigma has already planted the seed of doubt, leaving the rival unsure of their own actions. This type of subtle mimicry is brilliant in its execution. It doesn't require confrontation or even words. It's about the Sigma reflecting an enemy's behavior back at them, creating a sense of cognitive dissonance that forces the enemy to confront their own foolishness. It's not just a victory in the moment. It's a lasting sting that leaves the enemy second-guessing themselves long after the interaction is over. In the end, Sigmas don't rely on loud triumphs or flashy displays to assert their superiority. They thrive in the shadows, mastering the art of subtlety, strategy, and psychological warfare. Their strength lies not in brute force, but in their ability to remain unpredictable, to turn challenges into growth opportunities, and to manipulate perception without ever being caught in the act. They outlast, outthink, and outmaneuver their enemies in ways that leave others frustrated and bewildered. By maintaining an unwavering emotional discipline, crafting narratives, and reflecting their opponent's flaws back at them, they elevate themselves above the chaos, making victory seem almost effortless. The Sigma's power comes from their refusal to conform, to be boxed in, or to fight by conventional rules. They bend the world to their will through intellect, patience, and an unyielding focus on their own growth, leaving their enemies scrambling in their wake. Ultimately, Sigmas don't just defeat their rivals. They make them doubt themselves, turning every encounter into a step toward their own mastery. In a world full of noise and spectacle, Sigmas remain silent, powerful, and untouchable, proving that the most potent victories are often the ones you never see coming. If you found this breakdown of the Sigma mindset intriguing, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss another deep dive into the art of strategy and self-mastery. Hit that like button if you're ready to elevate your own game, and drop a comment below with your thoughts. Do you think you've got Sigma energy, or are you just getting started? And of course, share this with anyone who could use a little insight into how to rise above the crowd and outsmart the competition. Stay sharp and keep pushing forward. Thanks, spicy ladies, for tuning in. See you in the next video. Bye and stay blessed.